When the battlefield cries out for thunder and devastation, when enemy armor dares to peek above the ridgelines, and when the ground demands justice from above, the United States Air Force calls upon the one machine built for carnage, designed for mayhem, and feared across every war zone it's entered, the A-10 Thunderbolt II, affectionately known to every American warfighter as a Warthog. This is not just another jet in the American arsenal. No. The A-10 is a flying tank, an airborne monster built around a 30mm GAU-8 Avenger rotary cannon that can tear through armor like paper and level hardened positions in seconds. In this mission, the Warthog isn't just flying. It's heavily loaded, armed to the teeth with a payload so massive it could turn an entire valley into smoke and ruin. The scene is set deep in hostile territory, where insurgent forces have dug in, confident that their camouflaged bunkers, reinforced compounds, and RPG nests could withstand anything the Americans could throw. But they weren't ready for this. From a distant rumble in the sky, the sound builds into a soul-rattling roar, and there she is, low, slow, and mean, the A-10 flying barely a few hundred feet off the deck, hugging the terrain like a bird of prey, wings bristling with AGM-65 Maverick missiles, high-explosive incendiary rounds, laser-guided bombs, and cluster munitions. And that's just a start. The pilots of these birds are not just trained. They are elite, hand-picked warriors with nerves of steel and the instinct to destroy before they're seen. Their mission: eliminate high-value ground targets, support special ops teams pinned down by enemy fire, and lay waste to enemy strongholds that satellites had identified but no one dared touch. Until now. As the ground forces radio and coordinates, the Warthogs adjust course and begin their terrifying descent into the kill zone. A quick dive, a banking turn, and the nose of the A-10 points straight at the target. And then it happens. That unforgettable sound that makes enemies scatter in fear. BRRRT. In just 2 seconds, the Avenger cannon spits out dozens of armor-piercing rounds, each capable of melting through inches of steel, and the entire bunker system erupts in a fountain of dust, fire, and twisted debris. Trucks explode. Troops scatter. Command posts vanish in a blink. And the Warthog isn't done yet. It banks hard, circles back, and this time releases 2 Mavericks, streaking low and fast into a pair of mortar nests hidden beneath camouflage netting. Impact. Total annihilation. The A-10 flies through the black smoke, unaffected, unshaken, and utterly dominant. The JTACs on the ground are shouting their gratitude, knowing full well that without this close air support, the outcome would have been very different. But this is what the A-10 was made for: survivability, precision, and fearlessness in close air support. It's armor from cockpit to tail, built to keep flying even after taking hits that would down other jets. Its engines are mounted high to avoid ground debris. Its wings are designed for short takeoff and landing, meaning it can launch from rough airstrips near the front lines. And its weapon loadout? Absolutely devastating. In this operation alone, the A-10s drop laser-guided GBU. 12 bombs take out a command center buried under reinforced concrete, fire dozens of rockets into an anti-air emplacement, and use their cannon to surgically destroy enemy convoys trying to escape through narrow canyons. Every strike was precise, brutal, and effective. Enemy communications went dark. Morale collapsed. The battlefield changed in minutes. This wasn't just an airstrike. It was a message. When America sends in the Warthogs, you don't get a second chance. Back at base, the ground crews quickly refit the aircraft, wiping soot off the fuselage, loading fresh ordnance, and preparing it to fly again within hours. The pilots debrief, but their faces are calm. They know the mission is far from over, and there are more enemies foolish enough to challenge U.S. ground dominance. These men and women are the guardians of skies, and they fly a machine that no modern army dares underestimate. And while politicians argue about future jets and advanced stealth, every soldier in the dirt knows the truth. Nothing provides support like the A-10. In the theater of war, where life or death is measured in seconds and yards, the heavily loaded A-10 is America's angel of destruction, a true titan of close air power. And so, as dusk settles over the battlefield and the smoke rises from shattered targets, the silhouette of the Warthog fades into horizon. Not just a jet, but a symbol of unstoppable American resolve. But the true brilliance of the A-10 Thunderbolt II isn't just in its brutality. It's in its design for survivability and adaptability in the face of overwhelming adversity. Flying at ultra-low altitudes where radar locks are harder and man-pads lurk with deadly intent, the A-10 thrives where other jets fear to tread. Its titanium bathtub protects a pilot from ground fire up to 23 millimeters, and it's not unusual for a Warthog to come back to base with holes in its wings, shredded flaps, and even one engine out, but still flyable. That resilience was on full display during a recent multi-phase exercise simulating an urban anti-insurgency battle, where insurgent forces had embedded themselves among civilian structures and makeshift compounds. Precision was critical. Lives were on the line. And so the heavily armed A-10s were called in, tasked with threading a needle of destruction, striking insurgents without touching surrounding structures. With the aid of advanced targeting pods and real-time comms with stacks on the ground, the A-10s came screaming in with pinpoint accuracy. First came the cannon runs, short bursts calculated, lethal. Sniper towers crumbled. Roadblocks were obliterated. Then came the AGM-65 Mavericks, launched with laser guidance to strike only the exact enemy bunkers hidden behind old-school buildings. One pilot, nicknamed Grimlock, surgically took out a moving technical truck armed with anti-air launchers. He flew so low his aircraft kicked up dirt from the soccer field below, but that truck vanished in a fiery plume, without a single casualty outside the kill zone. It's the kind of surgical devastation only a platform like the A-10 can deliver. And while the tech on board is older than many of today's stealth jets, don't be fooled. Continuous upgrades have kept the A-10 lethal and relevant in modern battlefields. With precision engagement modifications, digital cockpit upgrades, advanced communications, and integration with next-gen command systems, the modern Warthog is smarter, faster to target, and more effective than ever before. Its pilots can communicate with drones, command posts, and recon units simultaneously, allowing real-time battlefield decisions. One squadron recently demonstrated this during a live-fire joint exercise where A-10s coordinated with MQ-9 Reapers to ID targets, with AC-130s lighting them up, and the Warthog swooping in to deliver the final hammer blow. The synergy was terrifying. Multiple threats eliminated in under 5 minutes, all while under simulated enemy anti-air fire. And then there's morale. Ask any U.S. infantryman pinned under fire what sound they want to hear most, and you'll hear it time and again. The BRRRT. It's more than a sound. It's a lifeline. It's the reassurance that air support is not coming. It's here, and the enemy's seconds are numbered. In Afghanistan, in Iraq, in Syria, and across undisclosed regions where freedom is defended and tyranny is hunted, the A-10 has built a legacy. A legacy not of flashy stealth or high-tech radar evasion, but relentless support, unmatched toughness, and pure destructive will. And today, the A-10 isn't retiring, it's evolving. New variants now test extended weapon racks, wing reinforcements, and AI-assisted targeting systems to push the Warthog deeper into contested airspace. The Air Force has even begun integrating the A-10 into coordinated drone swarms and combat cloud networks, turning this low-tech bruiser into a high-tech battlefield conductor. In a recent test flight, an upgraded A-10 successfully commanded 2 autonomous drones mid-flight, directing them to sweep for SAM sites while the Warthog plotted its bombing run. That's the kind of futuristic war-fighting doctrine no enemy expected from a 1970s jet. But that's the American way. Never underestimate what looks old until you see what it can do. And what it did on this particular battlefield was unforgettable. Night fell over the war-torn valley, and with infrared pods scanning the terrain, the A-10s returned for their final sweep. Targets that had previously avoided detection, camouflage artillery positions in a ravine, were now visible. Within seconds, one A-10 peeled off formation, dipped below radar cover, and unleashed 2 cluster bombs designed to neutralize mobile armor. The impact was devastating. Fire spread across the valley, and the enemy's last counter-battery unit was gone. Not a trace remained. As the Warthogs made their final pass, the ground units cheered. They knew the skies belonged to America again. As the dust began to settle and the acrid smoke curled into the twilight sky, the might of the A-10 Thunderbolt II remained etched into the scorched earth and the stunned silence of what had once been a fortified enemy stronghold. But this was only the midpoint of the Warthog Savage Symphony, for new coordinates came in, and without hesitation, The formation banked hard and headed southeast toward another hotspot flaring in red on the battlefield map. Intelligence confirmed that an enemy convoy was attempting a retreat under cover darkness, loaded with anti-air equipment, fuel, and command assets, an opportunity the Air Force would not let slip. The Warthogs accelerated low and fast, hugging the terrain like steel shadows, their night vision and thermal targeting systems feeding streams of data to the pilots. With split-second timing, the lead A-10 initiated the attack with a salvo of AGM-65 Mavericks, guidance locked, fire unleashed. The missile struck with shocking precision, detonating the enemy's mobile launchers in a searing flash of orange that lit up the hills. Seconds later, another Warthog came in with MK-82 bombs, dropped in a staggered pattern to blanket the valley floor, crushing supply trucks and cutting off escape routes. The symphony of steel continued. From the dark sky, the Warthogs rained 30mm justice with their GAU-8 slasher cannons, each burst ripping through armored vehicles like paper. The enemy, disoriented and pinned, could barely return fire. A few tried, launching shoulder-fired missiles in desperation. One homed in dangerously close to the tail of a Warthog, but the pilot flared, rolled, and executed a hair-raising escape maneuver so tight that even experienced observers held their breath. Back at command, analysts watched in real time through satellite feeds and drone overlays, stunned at the methodical precision and sheer power of the attack. What they witnessed was not just air power. It was a strategic demolition orchestrated in a style only the A-10 could deliver. It wasn't just about blowing things up. It was about denying the enemy every tool, every weapon, every inch of ground they could use to fight back. These weren't just missions, they were messages. And that message was clear. When the A-10 is called in, there's nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. The battlefield belongs to the United States. And the enemy knows it. One by one, radar installations, communication nodes, and fuel dumps were neutralized. By the end of the sortie, the entire enemy convoy lay in ruin. Charred wreckage under the moonlight, their ambitions turned to ash. As the Warthogs climbed to altitude and began their return journey, silence returned to the valley. But it was a different silence now, one born of fear, awe, and respect. Because somewhere, out there in the darkness, the sound of BRRT might return. And when it does, it means the United States Air Force is writing the final chapter of any confrontation. The pilots landed to cheers and celebration back at the airbase. Ground crews scrambled to rearm and refuel the jets, not for maintenance, but for readiness. Because the Warthog doesn't rest for long. The crew chiefs moved like clockwork, loading more 30mm rounds, inspecting Maverick rails, and fueling tanks with an urgency that hinted at another mission already on the horizon. In briefing rooms, pilots reviewed mission footage, analyzing every strike, every maneuver, and improving for the next one. These weren't just warriors. They were perfectionists. And their weapon, the A-10, was a reflection of that relentless drive. It's not just a plane. It's a guardian angel, an iron hammer, and a flying fortress all rolled into one. And every enemy commander from Syria to the Horn of Africa, from Iraq to Eastern Europe, knows that if you hear the BRRT, your time is up, but the mission wasn't over yet. Even as the A-10 Thunderbolt IIs returned from their devastating sortie, Mission Control received new intelligence. Enemy reinforcements were on the move, setting up entrenched positions along a critical mountain pass that served as the only viable route to a U.S. Allies forward operating base. If they were allowed to fortify it, the entire supply chain could be severed. There was no time to rest. Within the hour, the A-10s were back in the air, engines roaring like thunder, pilots focused, adrenaline sharpened by experience. Flying in tight formation, they approached the rugged terrain, using valleys and ridgelines to mask their approach. Enemy radar systems were limited in this region, but hostile spotters were already scrambling to call in positions. The Warthogs climbed briefly, gained line of sight, and unleashed their fury. Precision-guided dams dropped from underwing pylons screamed toward enemy fortifications, annihilating sandbag machine gun nests and command shelters before the enemy even knew what hit them. Explosions echoed across the cliffs like rolling drums of doom. The A-10's superior loiter time came into play now. While other jets might have made a pass and gone, the Warthog circled overhead, ready to strike again and again. Laser-guided bombs found mortar teams. Mavericks found fuel tankers tucked under camouflage netting. And always, the unmistakable growl of the 30mm GAU-8 cannon echoed from the sky, cutting through armored vehicles like a buzzsaw. From command bunkers buried deep in the enemy's mountain hideouts, fear gripped the hearts of those listening to the sounds of destruction above. They knew resistance was futile. The Warthogs operated with air superiority, and every attempt to mount a counteroffensive was shredded before it could begin. Forward air controllers embedded with U.S. Special Forces called in coordinates over encrypted comms, directing firepower with surgical accuracy. Splash one bunker. They call. Moments later, the ground shook with the force of a direct hit, and the Warthogs, they never flinched. They dipped low, strafed targets with methodical brutality, then climbed again with ghostly grace. Enemy survivors fled on foot, but even they weren't safe. IR sensors detected body heat hidden beneath vegetation. A-10 adjusted their angle, sent a few well-placed rounds, and silence returned. Local villagers, oppressed by militant forces, emerged cautiously after the strikes. What they saw was not chaos, but liberation, wrecked enemy weapons, destroyed convoys, and above all, the trail of protective power left behind by the A-10s. They waved and signaled thanks to the aircraft in the sky, grateful that their suffering had an end. Back at base, the pilots landed with a sense of grim satisfaction. Their machines, scorched by powder and heat, bore the marks of another brutal but necessary mission. And yet, every A-10 was intact, durable, battle-hardened, just like the airmen who flew them. Inside briefing rooms, the debriefs were intense and analytical. Every strike reviewed, every maneuver dissected, lessons logged, footage archived. For the next pilot, the next sortie, the next conflict. The U.S. Air Force's culture of precision and accountability doesn't rest, even when the mission is a total success. Because in modern warfare, success is not measured by victory alone. It's measured by the absence of U.S. casualties, the preservation of allies, and the unwavering deterrence that only overwhelming force can deliver. The A-10 Warthog doesn't just survive on the battlefield, it owns it, and its very presence changes the tactical landscape. Enemy morale plummets the moment its silhouette appears in the sky. Commanders rethink offensives, troops scatter, and those unlucky enough to stay behind face the full wrath of America's flying tank. There are reasons, after all, why despite calls for retirement, the A-10 remains a pillar of close air support. No other platform combines armor, firepower, endurance, and precision like the Warthog. It's not sleek, but it's effective. It's not stealthy, but it's terrifying. And every time it takes the skies, it carries a legacy of dominance and a promise that America will protect its troops and allies with unmatched lethality. The war zone fell quiet once more. Fires burned, smoke rose, and silence fell over the ridgeline, broken only by the distant, fading hum of A-10 engines disappearing into horizon. Mission complete. But the A-10 isn't done. It never is. Somewhere, in another region, another call will come. Another ally will need help. Another enemy will rise. And when they do, they'll look to the skies in dread, knowing that if the Warthog is coming, they're already out of time. As the dust settled over the scorched terrain, the unmistakable roar of the A-10 Thunderbolt II, often called a Warthog, echoed across the battlefield, signaling that the final wave of destruction had arrived. With every pass, the heavily armored aircraft demonstrated why it remains one of the most feared and effective close air support platforms in the U.S. Air Force's arsenal. The pilots, seasoned and composed under fire, maintained surgical precision as they guided their Warthogs through tight turns and hair-raising descents, releasing the last of their deadly payloads on enemy strongholds, bunkers, and mobile artillery positions. Below, the terrain bore the scars of relentless air-to-ground bombardment. Smoking craters, splintered structures, and decimated enemy convoys marked the path of the A-10's fury. What sets the A-10 apart is not just its ability to take a beating. Thanks to its titanium bathtub that shield the pilot from ground fire, but its capacity to dish out overwhelming punishment with pinpoint accuracy. In this operation, The aircraft unleashed its full might. AGM-65 Maverick missiles obliterated armor threats, while 30mm GAU-8 Avenger rotary cannon tore through soft targets with terrifying force. Its signature BRRD sounded a death knell for anything caught in its crosshairs. But it wasn't just about brute force. The coordination between air and ground units turned the A-10 into a surgical instrument. Forward air controllers on the ground relayed coordinates and identified enemy hideouts in real time, enabling the A-10s to make dynamic, in-the-moment targeting decisions that proved decisive in neutralizing pockets of resistance. As the mission approached its end, fuel levels dwindled and ammunition ran low. The Warthogs began their egress from the target zone. Flying low and fast over ravaged terrain that moment ago had been a hotbed of hostile activity. Behind them, a haunting silence replaced the chaos, interrupted only by the distant rumble of retreating vehicles and the cries of those left to witness the sheer devastation wrought from above. The A-10's role in modern warfare remains irreplaceable, especially in conflicts where urban terrain and asymmetrical threats require a combination of precision, persistence, and raw firepower. Despite calls from some circles to retire the aging platform, this operation stood as yet another irrefutable testament to its enduring value on the battlefield. Every sortie flew not just with armor and ammunition, but with decades of combat-tested doctrine and a warrior ethos that defines the U.S. Air Force's ground support philosophy. As the aircraft returned to base, streaked with soot and battle damage, ground crews rushed in with pride and urgency, ready to rearm, refuel, and send these sky beasts back into fray if needed. Today, the message to adversaries and allies alike was clear. When the A-10 takes flight, there's nowhere to hide. And when it's time to pulverize targets with extreme prejudice, there's no tool more fearsome, more reliable, and more surgically effective than the Warthog. In a world of stealth and supersonic jets, the A-10 remains a blunt, brutal, and battle-hardened force of thunder that America can always count on when the fight gets close and the stakes get real.